Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we're looking at the Roman soldiers mocking Jesus. And if you watched yesterday's video, we see where Pilate turned Jesus over to be crucified. And one of the things that I didn't cover because I wanted to include it with this one, it starts at verse 26. Um, and I didn't go into detail because I'm putting it into this one. But so I'm going to read Matthew 26. Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew 27 verses 26 through 31. It says, "So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, and then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Then they wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head, and they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt before him in mockery and taunted, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they spit on him and grabbed the stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off his robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to be crucified." I tell you, man, I read this and it's just I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's it shows you the evilness of people. But you see here, so Pilate ordered Jesus to be flogged with a lead tipped whip. Now, it depends on who you ask. Sometimes some people will think this was a single whip, with a single end with the lead on the end of it. Um, some scholars will call, sometimes it's called a cat of nine tails, and so I don't know exactly 100% what Jesus was flogged here with, but either way, even if it was a whip with lead on the end of it, or if it was a cat of nine tails, it would, whenever they were, when you whipped them, the lead, it was sharp. It wasn't just like a lead ball or anything on it. It was a sharp piece of lead, and it would rip into the skin and tear it up. So, how many times he got hit, his back would have been, whenever they did this, it wasn't like, oh, well, he hit him a couple of times and he had some red marks on his back. No, it would cut them and slice them open. And so, more than likely, by the time they were done, his back was raw and you probably saw more meat and muscle than anything. And possibly sometimes it would go down to bone. You could see bone. And so, this wasn't some, oh, he got whipped a couple of times, it wasn't that bad, left some red marks. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. Like I've said before, the Romans were very efficient at torturing and killing people and doing it slowly. And so this is what we need to make sure, you need to understand as they do this. So as we go into this, we then he was then given over to a regiment. And so um, a regiment was 200 men. So you had 200 men who had took Jesus into the governor's headquarters and were mocking him and abusing him, and they took this crown of thorns and put it into, or I'm sorry, this thing of thorns and put it into a crown. And it wasn't like when we think of like thorns, like blackberry bushes or anything like that. If you live in the South, we have citrus trees, and they have these long thorns on it. It would have probably more than likely been something like that, that would have been wound together, and so they were long and hard and very sharp. And then they put it on his head and shoved it down into his head, so those would have dug into his head, and then they struck him on the head with it. So they would have been not only striking him in the head, but they were pounding this thing into his head. And so he's his back's probably open raw at this point, and now they put this crown of thorns on him, and then they're smashing him in the head with this hard reed with a knot on the end of it. And and so, I mean, this is before he's even put on the cross. And so we're going to talk about this a little bit more with the crucifixion. And so it says when they finally got tired of mocking him, it doesn't say how long. It could have been an hour. I mean, we don't know how long. I mean, how long does it take 200 men to do this? And so they took the robe and everything they put on him, and then they put on his clothes, and then they led him away to be crucified. And so he was already being tortured. I can't imagine the grace. I mean, that's all it can be. That's all you could explain this with, the grace here for God not to just snap his fingers and watch them guys explode. I mean, he could have tortured them. He could have made it where that took them 10 years to die, the most agonizing death ever. And he didn't do it. He didn't do a thing. He just stood there and took it. Not doing anything wrong. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had lived a perfect life up to this point. And he sat there and took it, and he took it for us. It was 100% for us. We are the whole reason that happened. You know, I am, you are, every single one of us are the reason that happened. And, you know, we look at these guys and think, oh, how horrible these people are. Look how, you know, but again, yeah, what they did was evil, but it's because of us that this had to happen. And so, as much as we are mad at these guys for what they did to Jesus, we have to remember and understand that we're the reason he was in that in that situation in the first place. And so, you know, these guards, right? These guards, they were power hungry. They had a power hungry governor. You know, they had these religious leaders. They thought they had the upper hand, right? You know, but they didn't know. They did not know and understand the true power of the person that was in the authority of the man that they were torturing, and that they were mocking, that they had to condemn to death. And this is the thing, right? Worldly powers and philosophies and all that kind of stuff. You know, they're so often they don't understand Jesus. They mock Jesus, right? Non-Christians, I have non-Christians, I've seen non-Christians mock Jesus all the time. They can be very arrogant, right? And they mock Christians, they mock Jesus. But I'm telling you, right? They're not going to be that arrogant when Jesus returns, right? You can see, you know, it's not. And there's a ton of Bible verses that talk about that, and we'll look at those one of these days. But there's, you know, it talks about where you know, when Jesus returns, they're going to be begging for the mountains to fall, because they're going to know, right? They're going to know at this point. You know, yes, I have this discussion all the time that people will be like, well, they'll be like, what if you're wrong? Okay, if I'm wrong, I lived a good moral life. I tried to be a decent person. I tried to love people. I tried to, you know, be kind to people. Do my best to not do things to harm other people, right? And be a good person in the world and follow Jesus while doing it. Okay? So if I'm wrong, I lived a decent life and I was a good person. Right? If you're wrong, what is that? I mean, what else is there for you? And that's why we talk about this. And so it's just, we see this type of mentality a lot, and unfortunately we still have to show, this is the hard part. This is the hard part, right? We still have to show the same grace that Jesus shows. We're called to be like Jesus in this situation. And now that's hard, because I'm going to tell you right now, here's the thing. And I'm not saying that if someone just starts pounding on you and beating on you, you just sit there and take it, right? No, you need to defend yourself. There's a reason why Jesus didn't defend himself here. And it was purposeful. You know, he had to go to the cross. He had to go to those things. All right. But when the world is mocking you, and when the world's trying to beat you down, right? Metaphorically, we still have to show them the same grace that Jesus did. That's what we're called to do. We're called to love people who hate us. We're called to love our enemies. And this is hard. I can tell you, this is hard for me. My first reaction is, you punch me, I'm going to punch you 10 times, right? You hit me one time, I'm going to try to make it to where you can't stand up for 2 weeks. That's just how, you know, that's human nature, right? And so, you know, we have that reaction. We've got to get rid of that reaction, or overwrite that reaction with the love of Jesus. And this is right here is what we're called to do. And so when we feel that the world is unjust, right? And people, you know, that there's people out there that control the viewpoints, and they're hostile towards Christianity. You know, we see this all the time, right? It's a main narrative. Like, we know that most of the people in the media, right, are hostile toward Christianity, toward Christians. A lot of people in Hollywood are hostile. Like, a lot of people in the world, especially those who get into positions of power, for whatever reason, they tend to be hostile towards Christians. And that's just the way the world works. It's been like that from day one. And so, in the end, what we have to remember is that Jesus in the end wins. He holds the highest place. He holds the highest power. And so, as long as we're following him in the end, you know, it's like, even if they have to kill you, right? In the end, you still win. And unfortunately, we don't have to worry about that right now, you know, at least in the United States. And so, I use this video just to it's a short section of verse. It's a really small section. It doesn't go into a lot of details, but it says enough to show the grace of Christ and the grace of God. because these people were openly mocking him, beating him, whipping him, like just as abusive as could be. And he stood there and took it, didn't say a word. At least that we see. That no words were recorded. And then they sent him off to be crucified. And again, he had the power to, he could have just spoke a word and all kinds of things happened. Just, they could have vanished. They could have just exploded. He could have, like I said, he could have said one word and tortured them for the rest of their lives. You know? And so, but he didn't. And I wonder, we talked about this Sunday. I wonder how many of these guards, after the crucifixion, became Christians. And so one of the things that a very powerful statement is, because I honestly believe that there had to have been some who did, right? There had to have been some, especially after we'll see at the crucifixion. And this is the wonderful thing about Christianity versus any other religion in the world. There are going to be people in heaven, more than likely, who killed Jesus Christ. Literally, those who killed Jesus Christ. There will probably be some of them in heaven. And I want you to think about that. No other religion would dare put something like that in its text, right? You don't see that in any other religion. And so that's the wonderful thing about Christianity. We look at it, and what makes it so true is the simple fact is that the very people who killed God in human form, is there's more than likely there's going to be some of them in heaven. I just think about that. And that is truly amazing. And so I want to leave you with that, because I want you to think about that, because I think that just shows how powerful the love of Christ and what, true Christianity, not a religion, true Christianity looks like, because that's how Christ came. That's what Christ showed. That's the love he showed all the way through until his death and resurrection. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching. And I really have appreciated all those who have followed along so long. We are getting closer and closer to the end. I think this is day 235. So we're getting closer to that 250 mark. Like I said, we are going to go a little bit beyond 250. But just because we had to split some of these days into multiple days. But, I really do appreciate everyone who's been following along. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, go ahead and do that, because we're going to keep putting out different studies. We may spread them out a little bit. Maybe not daily studies, but we are going to spread them out a little bit. And we're going to change our format up some a little bit, and then continue to grow and develop this as we go. But subscribe so you get the alerts, you get the message of the new things that we put out. And as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.